Welcome to part 1 of our video presentation on chapter 12, which is titled Planning Information System Resources. I think a better and a more commonly accepted title for the subject matter of this chapter would be Strategic Information Systems Planning, or SISP. So that's the common acronym for Strategic Information System Planning. Now, the key premise of chapter 12 and the subsequent chapter number 13 is that information systems, meaning IT, and business managers need to work together to guide their organization in the planning and management of IS resources. So the idea here is that information system managers and business managers, senior business managers such as CEO and CIO, they need to work together to plan their business objectives, meaning something that is on the side of the entire organization, and also planning their goals and objectives for the IT department. And this planning has to be done in unison, meaning that one plan has to support the other, or one plan has to be a result of the other plan. So there needs to be alignment between those two plans. So chapter 12 is largely about that. It's about steps for effective IS resource planning so that the IS organization can enable current and future business needs or goals. So this is about planning. Now, chapter 13, the next chapter that we will cover, will be about roles, responsibilities, and some best practices for leading an IS organization. So chapter 12 is about planning, and chapter 13 is more about managing or leading in accordance with the plan that you create. So what are some of the benefits of information system resource planning or strategic information system planning? Now, before we go into those benefits, I would like to give you some background. There is a healthy degree of skepticism in relation to strategic information system planning or strategic planning in general. There is that belief that sometimes, it's impossible for an organization to predict the future, especially when it comes to the external environment that has so many trends, so many forces, so many different variables and factors. So some people believe that strategic planning is useless. At the same time, there's a counter argument to that, saying that plans may change, but planning is essential because it helps you move together as one single organization as opposed to pulling organization in different directions. Some people are saying that some people are saying that at least at least when you go through strategic planning, it creates a platform for communication, about where the organization is going. And others are saying that there's no contradiction in trying to predict in strategic planning and the fact that it's very hard or impossible to predict future, because most strategic plans, they're prepared with the time horizon of 5 or 10 years. They're saying there's no contradiction. I mean, you can plan things in an agile way, meaning you create a plan, but then if something happens in the external environment, then you adjust your organizational OIS plan so that you can respond to those changes in the external environment. So there's no contradiction in that. My own personal opinion on that is that, of course, future is always murky. However, you can be right about certain things. I mean, you can be right. You may not be able to predict those little fine details about your future operations. For example, you may not be able to predict your net income 5 years from now with dollar precision or cent precision. At the same time, you can be right about certain fundamental high-level truth related to business. For example, if you focus on organizational excellence in one area, so let's say your organizational excellence is defined in terms of superior customer service, then you will do well. I mean, maybe there will be like all those forces that are negative and that they're trying to put you out of business. But other things being equal, if you offer excellent customer service, you can count on being at least somewhat successful as an organization. So my belief is that you can be right. I mean, you can predict future when it comes to very high-level fundamental aspects of your business. So having discussed this background information, so what are the benefits of strategic information system planning or information resource planning? Well, first of all, by creating a strategic information systems plan, you create a context for IS resource decision making. In other words, your strategic information system plan provides an ideology, right? An ideology or the spirit of your IS organization, and this context, this ideology, can be used for making strategic decisions or even smaller decisions. So, for example, let's say your strategic plan says that one of the key goals of our IS organization is to reduce cost. So all other decisions with respect to, let's say, purchasing hardware or purchasing software or hiring people can be driven by this goal to reduce cost. It also helps you align information system department and what they are doing as a department and the goals of the entire organization. There are quite a few examples out there where the IT department, an IT department of an organization is doing something that not only not only seems to be like not supportive of what the organization is trying to accomplish. Sometimes it's even contradictory to what the organization is doing. For example, it's a hypothetical example, but let's imagine that Rolls-Royce, which is a manufacturer of luxury vehicles, is trying to improve customer service. They're trying to make sure that every customer who comes to the Rolls-Royce dealership is treated as royalty. And then the IT department of Rolls-Royce is trying to create a website that the company can use to sell their vehicles online. Now you see there's a contradiction, because when you try to sell vehicles online, you remove that personal touch from customer service. So that may not be a good idea. So that's an example, like one example of when IS department does not seem to be aligned with the entire organization. It also helps you balance the trade-offs between standardization and agility. You need to be strategic about standardization and agility. Now, standardization of hardware, software, and other things within the other resources within the IT department helps you reduce cost. But at the same time, if you standardize everything, if you bring everything to a common set of standards, to a common platform, then you may be depriving yourself of agility. In other words, it may be hard for you to change if the environment changes. So if the organizational goals dictate that you need to change an IS department. So you can plan for those things. You can plan for being both low cost, standardized, efficient, and also agile. And also strategic IS plans, they help you obtain IT capital investment approval. So basically, a strategic information system plan will help you to get funding. Because oftentimes organizations, when they evaluate requests for funding, let's say a request to fund a particular project, they will look at the strategic plans, and their first question will be, is your project well aligned with the overall strategy? If it is aligned, then you may get funding. If it seems to be contradictory or not well aligned with your strategic plan, then you may not get funding. To achieve all those benefits, achieving all those benefits requires both a periodic strategic planning process as well as an ongoing monitoring of the appropriateness of IS plans in response to changes in the business and its environment. So in other words, you need to create a plan every 5 years. That most organizations have a 5-year planning cycle, and also you need to constantly monitor, not like once every 5 years, but on a constant basis. You need to monitor whether your plan is being met or whether any changes are required to the plan, given the changes in the business and its environment. So those are the benefits of information system planning. Now, strategic information system planning is a multi-step process, and I would say that those steps, they're not as linear. Sometimes you just switch back and forth those steps. So when we talk about those steps, we will talk about those steps in isolation. I mean, sometimes you don't proceed through those steps in this linear fashion. Sometimes you go back and forth between those steps, so you start somewhere here, and then you figure out the details, and then you figure out your information vision and IT architecture and so forth. So we'll talk about those steps in isolation. And in the first part of this of chapter 12 presentation, we'll talk about the first 3 steps: assessment of current information resources or status quo, where you're at right now as an IS organization, establishing an information vision, meaning where you are going as an IS organization, where you see yourself 5 years from now, and also establishing IT architecture for that vision. So we're going to talk about the first 3 steps. Now, throughout all those steps, throughout the entire strategic information system planning process, one key consideration that you always need to keep in mind is alignment. The idea of alignment is very simple, but nevertheless, it's often violated. Alignment means your strategic information system plan, right, or your entire information system department needs to be aligned with the business strategic plan, meaning with the strategy of the entire organization, and it needs to support strategy of entire organization, or to make it, to express it in terms of organizational units, your IT department has to support your organization, right? You don't want to be in a situation where your IT department is doing something that is not supportive or even contradictory to what your organization is doing. So alignment is the key here. Alignment of IS planning and business strategic planning is very important. There is research out there that consistently shows that lack of alignment leads to poor performance of IT department or IS department, and overall failure of IS department to contribute to organizational success. So, alignment has to be done at several levels. For example, when you do assessment of current information resources, you also need to do assessment of the business, meaning you need to determine whether the resources that you have right now as an IS department seems to be appropriate for the business, for the operations of your entire organization. Similarly, your information vision, meaning the vision for your IT department, has to be aligned with the vision of the business. So, for example, if the vision of the business is to become, I don't know, the cheapest producer of milk, then your information vision need to support that, right? Maybe your information vision will be something along the lines of relying on open source standards, open source hardware and software standards, relying on outsourcing to reduce cost. This is something that will help the organization to reduce cost of producing milk. May or may not. Your IT architecture and your IS strategic plan, and we're going to discuss this in a minute, have to be aligned with the overall plan, with the overall strategy of your business. It needs to support it. Or sometimes, to say it in a different way, sometimes the overall organizational strategy, it also drives IT architecture and IS strategic plan. And then your operational IS plan, meaning how exactly you're going to go about implementing your strategic plan, needs to be well aligned with business operational plans. For example, budgets, right? There need to be budgets allocated for your operations, for your IT operations. So alignment happens on many levels, but the key idea here is that the entire strategy of the organization needs to be well aligned with the entire strategy of the IS department. There are different, and by the way, there are different organizations out there in the so-called information-intensive industries. For example, banking. Sometimes information system plans, they drive organizational strategy. In other words, information technology is often used by banks and by insurance companies, by organizations in information-intensive industries in general, to drive their business strategy. In other words, they compete based on information. But in more traditional industries where there's not as much room for using information technology, organizational strategy seems to drive information system strategy. So let's talk more about assessing current information resources, the first step. It involves inventorying and critically evaluating an organization's technical and non-technical resources, for example, human resources, in terms of how well they're meeting the organization business needs. So remember this part of alignment. Current performance is compared to a previous plan, competitors, or a set of past objectives. So there are many ways, you see, when you look at the current situation, you cannot really evaluate it. In other words, you cannot really express any judgment whether it's good situation or bad situation unless you compare it to something. Comparisons can be made using operational data, can also be made by a survey of client satisfaction. That's a very common way. In other words, you're saying that there are all those operational data, for example, usage of IS resources, bandwidth, lag, storage capacity. However, in a way, it all doesn't matter if it doesn't satisfy users. So some organizations, they start with client satisfaction. But again, if you measure client satisfaction or employee satisfaction, you need to compare it to something in the past or to some kind of target benchmark. For example, what other organizations are doing to see whether your client satisfaction or employee satisfaction is acceptable or not. So here you have an example of findings of something that was discovered during the assessment phase. So for example, you can discover that a standard IT platform to integrate our information system does not exist in our company, or sufficient gaps exist in automating value-added processes in our company. In other words, there are many processes that are very important that add value to your product or service, but there is a lot of inefficiencies. There is a lot of inefficiency in those processes, and they require automation. Or you may find that there is a consistent perception among business users that IS department is not responsive to their support needs. So they feel that IS department is slacking off, or they don't have enough resources to support what they need to do on the business side. Or you may discover that the level of user training is substantially below needs and expectations. So users cannot take full advantage of the resources offered by the IS department because they simply lack knowledge or training. Then the findings of the current status quo can be compared to prior year performance goals or indicators. So, for example, internal customer satisfaction with applications development services. Uh, the objective for last year was 80%, but you only achieved 71%, right? So you can compare to previous measures. Also, as I mentioned, measuring attitudes of users may be the best way to go when it comes to benchmarking current situation, because, as I said, it all comes down to user satisfaction. And at the end of the day, any information system is developed for end users. So IT managers should also consider assessing the attitudes of users about the performance of the IS organization in relation to the current needs and future direction of the business. So, as in a way, so it can be rephrased something like that. Ask users what they need, what they need right now and what they will need for the future, and based on that, you can create your information system plan. IS organization mission statement. It can be done as a part of strategic information system planning or assessing current information system resources. You need to critically examine your current mission statement for your IS organization and maybe improve it. Now, IS organizational mission statements, they're very important because they set forth the fundamental rationale or reason to exist for activities of the IS organization. So what is your mission of an IS organization? Why do you exist? It can vary substantially from one, IS mission statements can vary substantially from one organization to another, because some IS departments play more support role than strategic roles. I told you that in some information intensive industries, such as banking, IS departments play strategic role. They drive business, while in some organizations they simply support that. So mission statements, they reflect whether IS is playing a support role or a strategic role. The extent to which, in general, the IS organization plays a strategic role can be measured by the degree to which the organization is dependent on IT for business operations and the degree to which IT enables current business strategy. So if reliance in daily operations on IT is high, or if IT is a significant driver of organizational strategy, then the mission statement will reflect that the IS department is playing the so-called strategic role. In other words, it helps the company to compete. So here you have examples of two mission statements. Now, one mission statement is prepared by an IT manager, and one mission statement is prepared by a business manager. Now, pause this video for a second, read those two mission statements, and answer for yourself which mission statement seems to be more appropriate. So pause the video right now. Now, if you look at this, if you look at those two statements, you probably see that the first statement seems to be more on the technology side, while the second statement seems to be more on the business side. Now, personally, I believe that second mission statement is better because business always have to come first, right? So it doesn't matter if you're dealing with IT department or marketing department. Any business is about business. It's not about marketing per se. It's not about technology per se, right? And in my experience, I think this kind of distinction is not very common nowadays. Most IS managers, they're also very savvy, very experienced business professionals. So they would formulate something that is on the business side. They would formulate a mission statement that is similar to this one and not to this one. Okay, creating an information vision. Now, an information vision is a written expression of the desired future about how information will be used and managed in the IS organization. It has to be general enough to accommodate all operations of an IS department or IT department. At the same time, it needs to be specific enough to guide policy decisions. So specific decisions that are made within the IT department and specific policies, let's say in relation to procurement, in relation to data quality, in relation to security, they need to draw from your information vision. Developing an information vision requires both an understanding of the future direction of the business and an understanding of the role information can best play in enabling that future business strategy. So alignment is the key here. Alignment of the information system vision and the entire vision of the organization. And it has to focus on the long term. Information vision, just like strategic information system plan, they're typically formulated for the time horizon of 5 or 10 years. I think 5 years is the most typical one. Also, as a part of your strategic information system planning, you need to design the so-called information technology architecture. Now, many technology specialists, when they think of information technology architecture, they think of it on the technical level. Typically they think about, let's say, operating systems or single operating system that the organization system will use. However, the definition of information technology architecture is much broader. It depicts the way an organization's information resources will be deployed to deliver its vision. So basically, it's a high-level strategy of using and deploying information system resources. And again, we are using this term information system resources in a broad sense. We are using the so-called socio-technical perspective here. We are talking about both technological and non-technological assets, such as human assets, of the ICE organization, and how they will be deployed in the future to meet the needs of the organization and the information vision. So here we see like examples of technological resources or components, and here we have examples of human components. So they involve personnel, value, cultures, and management system, meaning like the entire organizational structure, how people are managed. Now, in a way, your IT architecture is synonymous to your IS strategy. There can be like different approaches to IT architecture. Now, one fundamental work on IT architectures was done by somebody named Jean Ross, who is a very big name in the field of strategic IS planning. So she wrote this article about stages of maturity with respect to IT architecture. So what she was saying, in essence, she was saying that as IS information system organizations mature, they go through the following 4 stages. And there's an implicit assumption that the higher the stage, the more mature, the more capable, the more beneficial your IT architecture becomes. So a brief discussion of those phases. Most organizations, they start at the so-called application silos stage. Basically, silos means like islands of productivity or islands of automation. Companies seek to maximize individual business units of functional needs. So in other words, there is no vision for an entire organization. Companies just trying to automate certain departments or certain parts of the organization. So there's a big disconnect between various systems and subsystems used in an organization. Now, stage 2 is a bit more mature. It's called standardized technology. Companies seek to enable IT efficiencies through shared services and application rationalization, resulting in enterprise-wide IT standardization. So standard is the key here. So typically at this stage, organizations are using one standard platform for automating operations across all organizational units. Typically, it's implemented by, let's say, introducing one single enterprise information system, let's say an ERP system, to automate all processes or all functional units within the organization using one standard platform. So the third stage is called rationalized data. So the idea here is that when it comes to software and hardware, everything has been automated and standardized. So now the focus is on data. It's organizations are trying to use data in a way that will benefit their organization. Technology, by technology we mean software and hardware is no longer problematic. It's more about data use. And the highest phase is a so-called modular phase. Modular phase means you're trying to standardize things, but at the same time you're trying to achieve flexibility with loosely coupled IT-enabled business process components, which enable local differences but also preserve enterprise-wide standards. So in other words, things are standard within your organization, but at the same time the modules, the components, the systems, the subsystems that you're using are loose enough so they can be quickly reassembled and reconfigured so that you can respond to changes in the external environment, meaning the business environment, and also the environment that is external to the business itself. So this is what is meant by agility or flexibility typically. So here we have like a visual depiction of those maturity stages. So again, when you go from application silo to modular, you're becoming more mature. So here we have like some strategic applications. You have in this stage you're trying to achieve local functional optimization. Here you're trying to achieve IT efficiency across the organization. Here you're trying to optimize everything across organization, and once again technology is no longer a problem. You're focusing on data mostly. And here you have strategic choices, meaning you can because your IS architecture is flexible enough, you can decide where you want to be as an OS organization, as an IS organization, and you can follow up on that plan fairly quickly. So here we have like another way of depicting that maturity framework. So here you see like what kind of capabilities you're trying to develop as a result of implementing a specific type of architecture. And here we have like the typical justification used for creating for developing a particular IT capability. So it's a repetition of what we've discussed previously. You can pause the video for a second to look at those things. Okay, so here we're going to talk about a strategic IS plan. It's a long, it consists long-term. I wouldn't call them objectives, because typically in strategic management, when it's long-term, they call them goals. So it's a collection of long-term goals and objectives that represents measurable movement towards the information vision and IT architecture. And it also outlines major initiatives or projects that must be undertaken to achieve these objectives. Here, here we're going to talk about some general steps that are used to create an information system plan. First of all, you need to conduct an external analysis. In other words, what are the things that are outside of the IS organization? And by outside, we mean the overall business environment of the organization and the external environment of the organization, meaning you need to take into account what's happening in the entire organization, something that is outside of the IS department. And also you need to look at that broader socio-technical environment within which your organization operates, macroeconomic trends, cultural trends, technological trends, and so forth. You also need to look at the internal analysis. You also need to look on the inside of the organization, what kind of resources you have, and then based on that you establish vision, mission, goals, and objectives for the entire organization. And once you for the entire IS organization, once you establish that, you will come up with specific strategic initiatives or projects that will help you accomplish those goals and objectives. And sometimes strategic initiatives that you come up with, they target more than one goal and more than one objective. Now, most planning processes involve iteration through these 4 steps. And once again, it's not linear like that. You just keep switching back and forth between those plans. But the idea here is to create an overall plan. So this completes part 1 of our video presentation on chapter 12. Thank you for listening.